My name's Zeki Kucuk-Kose. It's a bit of a mouthful, but I'm a first-class honours graduate from Ulster University. I'm a software engineer currently at the Rakuten blockchain lab at the moment. So some of the stuff we're up to, we're actually building a cryptocurrency exchange, which is being released in Japan in a couple of months. It's only open to Japanese residents, but I'm sure you'll see in the news if we get hacked or not. So fingers crossed. I've previously worked on large-scale fintech projects at Deloitte Digital as a consultant. So what am I actually going to cover? So what I'm going to talk to you about, the mobile app ecosystem status quo. So what that actually means is, what do mobile apps look like? Yeah, walk away, yeah. So what that actually means is, what does the mobile app ecosystem look like? How are apps built? What problems do they have? What benefits do they have? That type of thing. And then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what progressive web apps actually are, how they're disrupting the mobile application scene, and then how you can actually go about building your own progressive web app. And then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a suicide prevention app that I'm building in my spare time. So as it says, there is a little bit of a trigger warning. I'm going to be talking about issues like suicide, mental health, depression, self-harm, and things like that. So if you feel a need to leave the room, then please do so. There's no shame in that. And I would ask everyone to be respectful of everyone else in the room. But I'm sure you don't need to be told to do that. We're all grown-ups. So what does a mobile app ecosystem look like at the moment? Well, there's a number of different ways to actually get an app out to your users. The first way is to build a native app. So a native app is actually built for a specific platform. So what that means is you're writing code in Swift or Objective-C for iOS, or you're writing code in Java or Kotlin for Android. So the result of building an app natively is that it kind of looks and feels like a native app. All native apps tend to have the same kind of layout, so your headers will be where you expect them, your nav bars will be where you expect them, stuff like that. They're also able to use gestures, so on an iPhone, you'll be able to do swipes and stuff like that. It'll all be consistent across your native apps. You can access all of the hardware off the phone itself, so you can access GPS, Bluetooth, accelerometer, everything you need to get access to, really. There's no problem with that. In terms of getting that app out to a user, the way that works is it's published to an app store. So iOS, you publish it to the App Store. They have an extra step where they have to verify that it meets certain criteria. And then Android, it's a little less strict, where you can just kind of get anything out there and no one really necessarily needs to look at it. Then you've got cross-platform apps. So they're pretty much identical to a native app in terms of how they actually function, but how they're built is where it differs. So you have frameworks like Xamarin, where you have one common code base, which then eventually gets compiled into a language that your platform can understand. So again, like native apps, they look and feel like a native app, have all your gestures, have all your kind of layout and navigations the way you'd expect them to. And again, they can use all of the same hardware, so they can access the underlying hardware of the device. Then you've got hybrid apps. So these are apps which still run natively, but they're written in your web technology languages, so your JavaScript, your HTML, your CSS. And how they're actually like a web app which executes within a wrapper on the native platform. So they're quite powerful in that you write your code once again and you can use it on many different platforms, but you have to go through a bit of an extra step in terms of accessing the the phone's underlying hardware. So you have to use different plugins to basically translate what you're trying to do to the native API. So different frameworks like Ionic exist to be able to do that, and Ionic behind the scenes is using Apache Cordova to do all of that stuff for you. But as I say, it still runs natively, still can look and feel like a native app, and your user doesn't really know the difference. Again, it's all distributed via the App Store. And then finally, you've got kind of your bog standard web apps now, which kind of sound unimpressive after all that stuff. But again, it's just written in JavaScript, HTML, CSS. You've got your classic frameworks, which everyone loves, like Angular and React. Now, different from a native app, obviously, they can't necessarily access all of the underlying hardware. There's different rules and kind of permissions that the web operates on. And they rarely operate or work offline, essentially, so there may be a little bit of caching done by an app or by a web app, but it's rare that you'll be able to expect much functionality if you're offline. So what problems do app developers actually face at the moment? So kind of, if you're developing an app which you want to be truly global, your biggest problem is the differences in internet speed around the world. So although we're in a developed country where we have 4G and even talks of 5G coming, in a lot of the emerging countries around the world, India, Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, you know, people there do use Twitter, but their internet speed, they're talking 2G. Like you don't really stand a chance of someone being able to download like a 100 meg app. It's just not gonna happen. In terms of kind of then where that leads to, it leads to a slow website load. So if your website's huge, has a bundle of like 60 megabytes or something crazy with all of your resources, again, it's just never gonna load for a user on slow internet connection. So there actually is a statistic, research was done where 50% of your user base aren't gonna wait more than 3 seconds for your web app to load. So you've just lost 50% of your users if it's taken that long. There's a high level of friction. So what I mean by that is it's hard once you've written your code and written your app to actually get that into the hands of users. People who kind of are habitual, they don't like to download new things. Us as developers in here might be a little different where we're like, well, I want to see what that's about, I want to see what that guy's up to. But if you ask your friends, your family, your mom, your dad, they're rarely going to install new apps. And actually, on average, an average user installs 0 new apps a month. And I would guess I would be like that on my phone. I mean, once you've downloaded the apps you need, Facebook, Instagram, your banking apps, how often do you download a new app? Maybe a game if you're bored, but not that many. And then in terms of user engagement, so one of the biggest problems developers face is you've built your app or you've built your web app. How do you keep users engaged? So in terms of statistics, 87% of the user engagement is with a native app. So what that means is if I was on my phone for a week, 87% of that phone usage would be on a native app. The other 13% would be on a web app or a mobile website. But then it kind of gets flipped on its head where the reach of the web is so much greater. So although you're spending all of this time on a native app, you're actually only using maybe 3 different native apps during the week for that 87%. But then that 13% of the time where you're actually on websites, you're going across hundreds of different websites, so your reach is just far greater. You're more likely to be discovered by someone, but they might not spend that much time on your website or on your web app. It's just the way people work, really. So where do PWAs come in? So PWAs, progressive web apps. They're a new breed of web app which combine the benefits of a native app and also the low friction of the web, so that kind of wide-reaching ability which I was talking about. So guy Alex Russell kind of coined the term along with one of his mates, progressive web app. So he kind of was of the opinion that you need to give something a good name for it to take off, and it's kind of true. So he came up with a set of criteria which a progressive web app actually is. So you've got responsive, so it needs to work on any form factor, mobile, tablet, desktop, whatever it may be. It needs to be connectivity independent. So what that means is it needs to function both offline and online. And when it functions offline, it actually needs to do something meaningful to show something to the user. So even if that's just a customized web page that says you're offline, sorry about that, blah, 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 it's better than, in Google's opinion, having a little dinosaur appear on your app where you just don't know what's going on. They have app-like interactions, so they adopt what's called this kind of shell and content application model. So what essentially that does is kind of like your Apache Cordova and Ionic apps where everything is kind of executed in a shell. It results in someone going onto a website and it looks as though you're executing a native app. There's no kind of URL bar or anything like that. It looks like a native app, and if you design it correctly, it actually flows like a native app. There's no kind of jaggy loading or anything like that. So it's fresh. So what that means is your app is always staying up to date for you. So with progressive web apps, you can use what's known as background sync. So even if your user isn't on your app at that moment, you can do a background refresh of the content. So if they're offline for a period of time and then they go back online and your app is updated, then you can refresh that content behind the scenes. So they're safe, so they have to be served over HTTPS. There's no middle ground for it, it just has to be. And it's because of the way they work behind the scenes. They use things called service workers. And I'll talk a little bit about them later, but essentially for safety, you need to do that. They're discoverable, so if you have a native app, if you build that, put it on the App Store, likelihood of someone finding that without a massive marketing campaign isn't that great. If you do a Google, you might find someone talking about it, but it's not that likely. So one of the benefits of progressive web apps is that you can make them discoverable by search engines. So you specify properties in a manifest file that allow it to be discovered. It's quite beneficial. They're re-engageable. So what that means is we talked about how web apps have kind of this low level of engagement where you spend a small amount of time on it and you maybe come back to it once every so often. So these progressive web apps are re-engageable. So they use things like push notifications to bring your user back in, to re-engage them back into your app experience. And they use another thing where you can actually add it to your home screen. So not like where you go onto a website and you add a link to your home screen. This actually looks like an app icon. You can have splash screens, you can have stuff like that. It just improves the user experience and makes them more likely to want to commit to your app. So as I say, they're installable and they're linkable. So what that means is, if you wanted to download a native app, again, it's a bit of a journey. You have to go into the App Store, you have to search for it, you have to find it. With this, you can just share a URL with somebody. And don't underestimate the power of that. I mean, in Northern Ireland, whenever I've been walking through the train stations and bus stops, you see so many adverts for things. And if there was a URL there that someone could just quickly go to or scan or do something, it's quite powerful. Or if you were sharing an app with your friends, it's very powerful to be able to send someone a URL and have an app which just loads instantly or can be installed instantly in a matter of seconds. It's quite a big deal. And so, in the words of the inventor Alex Russell, these apps, they're not packaged and deployed through app stores. They're all just websites that took the right vitamins. They're just beefed up websites. So any web app can be a progressive web app. That's where progressive comes from. You progressively improve the user experience. So they keep the web's kind of ask when you need it permissions model. So you download a native app, up front it's going to say, right, I need access to your Bluetooth, your accelerometer, your Wi-Fi, I need access to your contacts, everything like that. And you're kind of thinking to yourself, well, why do you need all this? It's like, okay, if you asked me whenever you wanted to get my Bluetooth, fair enough, I'll probably give you it to do what I need to do. Progressive web apps follow ask when you need it, where once you get to a piece of functionality that requires that, you get asked for it. It's a bit better. And then the difference again between native apps and progressive web apps and where progressive web apps succeed is your user isn't instantly committed to it. So with a native app, you do have to go through that journey of downloading, installing, downloading 100 megs, 200 megs sometimes. With this, your user can go onto it, see what it's about, and then maybe if they've come back 3, 4, 5 times, at that point, you can cleverly ask them, do you want to add this to your home screen? Do you want to install it? It's a better way of working. So your apps kind of have to earn the right to be on your phone rather than just install me so you can use me. And then there's 4 kind of main properties of progressive web app. So they're fast. So progressive web apps, they provide experiences that are indistinguishable from a native app. They just start up fast. They load fast. Content, because you can cache it, everything's there available for you. So you can start the app again, and you might not even need to go out to the network to actually request those resources. So it's fast. There's an integrated user experiences, as I say. They look and feel like a native app. They sit in the user's home screen. They send push notifications. They provide a reliable experience. So they work, as I say, independent of connectivity, offline, online. And they're engaging because you can send push notifications and add them to the home screen. So what you've got there is fast, integrated, reliable, and engaging. So what does that spell? First letter of each of those words. Fast, integrated, reliable, engaging. Fire? Yeah. Progressive web apps are on fire. That's what people say. Because they're changing the way the web works. They're changing how you... By my clock, I'm only 14 minutes in.
Sorry.
That's cutting it close, right? I've only got 5 minutes left, guys, because we started late, I believe. So I'm going to have to actually skip through to what I want to talk to you about. So what I'm actually building here is, in my spare time, is, as I say, a suicide prevention app. So what is it actually going to be? It's going to be the first line of intervention for someone who's contemplating suicide. So someone who is very low and is thinking of taking their own life. This is something which they would use on their phone. So they can use it as a web app, or they can add it to their home screen. And using things like push notifications and stuff like that, you can keep that user engaged. So you can keep them wanting to use that app to be able to get a benefit from that app. So as I say, you proactively engage with individuals experience mental health issues. The app can be used when there's no internet connection. So I've seen web apps for suicide prevention being built, and you have to be online to use them. And realistically, if someone is thinking of taking their own life, they're probably going to be in an isolated place, which might not necessarily have an internet connection. Like, think of the likes of in a forest in Cave Hill or something like that, you know, where it's just, you can't rely on that. And so you need some way to be able to interact with them offline, even if that's just a matter of call this phone number, get help. If that content is cached there and is reliably there, then you can engage with that user. It's just much better. Going to help individuals develop an action plan. So what I mean by that is actually have a set of steps for them to follow if they're thinking of taking their own life, which is quite important because someone who's suicidal isn't necessarily suicidal every single day, all the time. There may be moments or times where they're feeling good, and whenever they're feeling good, then you can help them develop this action plan to come up with things like, who do you want to contact? Do you want to contact your family? Is there a friend you can contact? Or even just a matter of contact Samaritans, this is what you can do. And that action plan just takes the burden off the person to have to decide what to do, and instead guides them through it and helps them. And as I say, the use of push notifications, so encourage them to come back to the app. If they've used it and you haven't seen them in a couple of days, send them a push notification, try and get them back in to see what's going on. So why am I actually building it? So I have a personal experience with suicide. My brother Ozzy took his own life back in January of 2017. And since then, it always occurred to me that, right, I'm a software engineer. I can do something with code. I think there's a really powerful thing about writing code where with normal businesses and normal companies, you always need kind of a constant injection of resources. You always need people on the front line, people talking, which is needed, definitely. You need human interaction. But with code, it's really powerful because I can write that code once and I can help everybody without me needing to personally be there with everyone. So helping someone develop an action plan without needing someone on the phone to them for half an hour. And it allows someone to take their own time at doing it. There's not as much pressure around it. You don't need to feel a stigma of talking to someone about it. The rate of suicide in Northern Ireland, as I'm sure you've heard in the news, and I know it might sometimes sound like we're flogging a dead horse with it, but it is a massive, massive problem, extremely massive problem. In the last decade, suicide rates more than doubled, and there's not enough people talking about it. People just, you know, it's kind of brushed under the carpet. I think it's maybe a British thing that we've kind of inherited where the stiff upper lip of just get on with it, you'll be okay. And even the older generation of who's lived through the Troubles, who said, well, I made it through the Troubles, I'm okay. So you guys, you're all gonna be okay as well. But in fact, it's actually the biggest killer of men under 40, like bigger than cancer. It boggles the mind, it really does. But even though there's that statistic of the biggest killer under men, it still affects everyone. It affects women, it affects children. It was tragedy. A girl I know who's in second year at school, secondary school, a little girl in first year, age of 12, took her own life. And you have to wonder to yourself, like, how did someone get to that point at the age of 12? At the age of 12, I was just playing with Pokemon cards, you know? Like, I don't know whether it's a societal change or whether it's the influence of social media or what it may be. But the estimate in Northern Ireland of the cost of someone taking their own life is actually £1 million to the economy. Like £1 million, someone's life, that person throughout their life actually has such a large impact on the world. Like, it might not be sinking in, but what I'm saying is human life is so important. And every single week, there's about 6 people dying from suicide in Northern Ireland, and there's something that we can all do about it. Whether that be through things like this, or creating an app where you're trying to help people, or whether it be through kind of talking to someone or raising awareness about it. I'm sorry that I didn't get to show you any kind of work that I've been up to, but I appreciate all of your time. And thank you for coming. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to talk to you after this, 100%. Come up and grab me. I don't even think we have any time for questions right now as part of this presentation. A question, yeah? Yeah? Does anyone have any questions? Yes?
Is there anywhere we can see the rest of this presentation? Is it online? Or
Well, I can make it available if, I mean, yeah, if NIDevConf provide me with some way, or yeah, we'll get something arranged to get that shown. Yeah, that'd be good. Good idea. Yeah, I'll make sure to get that out there. You can, or even reach out to me on LinkedIn or anything. My name and everything should be on the NIDevConf website. Feel free. There's a link to my LinkedIn in there, so you can get in touch with me through that. Yeah. Yeah. Not very close, to be honest. So the company I work at, Rakuten, they have this program. So Rakuten sponsor Barcelona, and so they have all these kind of football-related terms, but essentially it's called Playmaker of the Season. So what Rakuten were doing is they're kind of seeing what they can do to help someone who's doing something in the community in their own time. So Rakuten are a global company, and this is being run across the European Union, so all the companies in the European Union. So I'm mentored into that, and it's being presented at a couple of meetings to the kind of heads of the EU. So I'm hoping to get support there from that. I mean, as you say, like when you've got a full-time job and you're trying to do stuff in your own time, like it can be tough to find the motivation. You know, it definitely is. And I'm not even a front-end developer as a trade. You know, I'm a back-end developer. That's what I do all day, every day. And so this, like, I'm by no means a subject matter expert in it whatsoever. So I'm trying to reach out to people, essentially, to get the word out. If people think they can help me, fire me a message. Like, I'm never going to say no to some help. Like, that's what I'm here to talk about. Everybody, thanks. Yeah, sorry. Sorry. Yeah.
Just one more. Is it open source? Is this the thing you're building? People make it open source? So?
I mean, it hasn't been something that I've considered, to be honest. I mean, it's not going to be for profit, so I wouldn't see a problem in making it open source. I mean, do you think that would be a good idea? Like, yeah?
I think so.
Yeah?
I think it would go well down. Yeah, I think then you can open up your forum for getting others, you know.
It's a good shout. Yeah. Thanks, man. How do we think about that? Cheers, guys. Thanks again.